We are ready.
All right. Very good. Good evening. I'm Bill Bowie, and welcome to our committee and board meeting this evening, March 9th, 2022. I will make the requisite motions so that we can conduct these meetings virtually. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the Fairfax County Emergency Ordinance, Park Authority Board needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record, as we did at our first electronic meeting. During our meeting, if you wish to be recognized, please raise your hand. And when I recognize you, please say your name. This will ensure that you are recognized and the public knows who is speaking. If you intend to vote nay or abstain on any item, we will need to do a roll call on those votes. Because each member of this board is participating in this meeting from separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each board member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. And I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each one of your colleagues. Following the roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member, and we will go alphabetically. Also, as the evening progresses, if additional board members join us for our meetings, I will ask them to verify their audibility and their location. All right. Abena Edu.
Abena Edu joining from my residence in Lee District.
Linwood Gorham.
Linwood Gorham joining from my residence in Mount Vernon District.
Tim Hackman.
Tim Hackman from my residence in the Drainsville District.
Ron Kendall.
This is Ron Kendall, participating from my residence in the Dominican Republic.
Faisal Khan.
Faisal Khan at my residence in Providence District.
Ken Quincy.
Ken Quincy, participating from my residence in the Providence District.
Mike Thompson.
Mike Thompson, participating from my residence in the Springfield District.
Jim Zook.
Jim Zook from my residence in the Springfield District.
And I'm Bill Bowie. I'm participating from my residence in the Hunter Mill District. Maggie Godbowl is absent and excused this evening. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel over to Secretary Thompson so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of this board.
This is Mike Thompson. You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
This is Tim Hackman. I second.
This is Mike Thompson again. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
Thank you, sir. This is Bill Bowie. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by each other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures, the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this board to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting, and that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of this board and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that this board may conduct this meeting electronically via Zoom. It is so moved.
This is Mike Thompson. You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Tim Hackman. I second.
This is Mike Thompson. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Mr. Chairman, the motion is approved.
Thank you, sir. Now that the preliminary matters are complete, we can begin with the administration and board committee meeting. Remind you when you're talking, please state your name. And Mr. Khan, the floor is yours.
All right. So this is Faisal Khan, and I call the Administration and Board Management Committee meeting to order. Allison, could you please present the items?
It'll help if I unmute myself. Good evening, I'm Allison Rankin. I am going to talk to you tonight about the process we're going to undergo to review the policy manual. Very exciting. So we review the manual every 5 years in accordance with our accreditation requirements. That is a requirement so that we're making sure that we continue to meet the community needs in case there's been changes in the community or in other county policies that our park authority policies are reflective of those updates. And since we last did our last review in 2018, prior to our 2018 accreditation cycle, we're starting this review now so that we're in line for our 2023 accreditation review as well. We want to be clear about the distinction between policies and procedures. Policies are generally broader statements. They are kind of our rules that govern the implementation, but they are not to address the actual implementation of the policy. That will come in our internal procedures. We have, as you might imagine, many SOPs in place, and that's where we get into the how-tos of this. But the policies themselves need to be sure to be broad and overarching. In the last 5 years, we've had one new policy developed. You all are well aware of that. The policy 111 was approved last summer to allow us to do these board meetings electronically. So that policy, because it's been recently done, will not be reviewed as a part of this review cycle. The process we're going to undergo in this fun journey we'll be on, we've assigned each policy to a lead staff member. That person is starting the process of meeting with appropriate staff teams that come together to look at each specific policy, to review it and recommend any changes and see if updates are needed, or if the policy is needed at all. We may end up deleting policies. That's happened before, or adding new ones. That team will bring their proposed revisions to the senior management team for their review. Once that team has reviewed and vetted those suggestions, we will bring the proposed revisions back to this committee. Once and we'll bring them in chunks. We'll bring each policy to this committee over the next year. Once we have a final set of revisions and updated policies, we will submit the whole thing to be reviewed by the county attorney. And then our final step will be to bring it back for full board approval. Our timeline looks pretty similar to what was done 5 years ago. So we'll bring, as I said, the policies will come in chunks of 5 or 6 policies each time. We're hoping to do it once a month so that we're not always looking at policies because it's not the most exciting piece, but it's important. So we're hoping to bring them once a month over the next 8 months, so that by the end of the year, we have a final copy that will be ready for county attorney review. And then we can bring the final copy back to the board in early 2023. So our next steps are that I will email out the current policy manual out to all of you by the end of this week. We ask that you go through the policies and read each one and send me any suggested revisions that you might have, edits, comments, questions, so that I can share those with the staff teams as they're conducting their reviews, and we can incorporate your suggestions in that process. And then, as I said, we'll bring the policies back piece by piece to this committee for discussion and approval. And that's it. Any questions, discussion?
Yeah, Allison, is it necessary to review all of is that part of the capital requirement that we review every single policy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that the entire manual gets reviewed every 5 years.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? Ron?
Yeah, Ron Kendall, I just think this time probably the big question is how do we knit the equity stuff inside the policies that we already have? Because that would be a new thing. We didn't go through that as equity the last time we did the policy review, though I think it was on a lot of people's minds when we did it.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. And we have asked staff as their teams are meeting to incorporate that perspective in as they're doing their reviews. But for each of you, as you're looking at them as well, it'll be important for everybody to be keeping that perspective and mindset as we're going through this process.
Any other questions? Well, seeing and hearing none. So now I hereby adjourn the Administration and Board Committee meeting.
Thank you, Faisal.
Thank you, sir.
We had an awards committee meeting set for 5:15, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, we're going to have to postpone that until the 23rd. So we are now in recess until 5:40.
Oh, it has not. Thank you. Okay, Alice.
Do it again.
Okay.
This is Ken Quincy, and I'll call the Budget Committee meeting to order. It is 5:41 p.m. And I'll ask Mike Peters to present the items. Mike?
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Quincy. Allison, if you would bring the slides up, please. During the regular budget process, I know it's a little odd that last month we came to you and we talked about our third quarter forecasts, which are sort of rolled into the next budget process. And then we come back to you now to talk about our second quarter update. So what I'm able to present to you tonight would be where we were as of the end of the second quarter, and these trends are continuing. So we're expecting things to continue in a positive manner from an operating standpoint. And remember last time we spoke about some of the compensation increases and the effect that those will have, but most of that effect will have on our books next year. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Allison. First, we'll talk a little bit about the general fund in the next slide. And here you can see we are comparing ourselves here in FY22, both to budget and then FY19 and FY21 actuals. So far, we are moving along just as we had expected. We have expended about 46% of our overall budget as of this point at the end of the second quarter. Revenue is starting to increase as programming continues to move forward. And some of what we talked about in the third quarter report, talking about how our summer camp had filled up very quickly. Remember, we do have a finite number of slots, but that continues to fill up, and we're well over 80% full at this point. We also continue to see savings on the general fund side in non-merit salaries, which are down about $309,000 in the current fiscal year when compared to FY19. And that revenue, in terms of that variance, remember that that's really focused on RecPac. And as we continue to operate the RecPac programs, we're also looking for RecPac instructors. That will certainly move right along with what we're able to do from a capacity standpoint there as well. Next slide, please, Allison. Now here we'll go into the revenue and operating fund, and we'll talk about things at the sort of high level in terms of the activities. I'll also then show you some of the graphics that we usually discuss, just showing how we compare year over year in terms of where we are at this point in time. Next slide, please. So we're continuing to show strong revenue performance for the revenue fund. Of course, golf and managed parks are coming in high. We've talked about that in terms of continuing our streak with golf rounds, generally good weather, and certainly driving range revenue as well. Rec centers are meeting their allocations, even though they're showing in this category as being about $3 million In the red, that's to be expected at this point, because remember, we're ramping up with our programs that are associated with the rec centers. And you'll also see that in the section here in terms of transferring, we have transferred out our debt service and our $800,000 to the county. We also have seen in the admin category, that's the $3.9 million in transfers that we worked with you to authorize beginning of the year to be able to help plug the hole on our reserves. So all in all, we're in good shape in terms of where we expected to be at this point. If you go to the next slide, you can see how the revenue really lines up. So far left, I know these are shades of green here. Far left is FY18, and far right for each quarter is FY22. So you can see in the first quarter of the year, we were on par revenue-wise with FY18 and certainly above last year and FY19 and FY20. Second quarter, we have just gone through the roof in comparison to FY18 all the way through to FY21. And part of the reason for that is certainly seeing the increased revenue, as we've talked about in golf. Also, when we've opened up our summer camp and our class offerings, as well as some pass sales and things that we've seen there. That's just excellent performance for us at this point.
I'm sorry, Michael.
Yes.
This is fiscal year, not calendar year, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can see in third quarter, we'll continue these positive trends we'll continue expecting these positive trends to continue, certainly higher than last year and certainly higher than FY20 as well. Next slide, you'll see the expenditures. And remember, we really see the majority of our expenditures on the revenue fund side generally in the first quarter of the fiscal year. And that would be starting in July. That's when we're spending money on our camps, our highest activity level of the year. And you can see the first quarter of this year, which was last summer, we continued to hold expenses as low as we could, but we operated our successful summer camp program. So our expenses were lower than the FY18, 19, and 20, and certainly, of course, higher than 21 because of our capacity issues. Second quarter, we're right on par with what we would be expecting to see, and we'll continue to see these similar trends in the third and fourth quarter. So when you combine that into the next slide, you can see our net revenue performance. So again, because we take in the revenue in the previous fiscal year and have so much of the expenditure in the following fiscal year, we do expect to have a net loss in the first quarter of the year. And generally, we've expected a net loss in the second quarter, but you can see because we think of really pent-up demand and the rush to be able to register for all available slots, you can see that we actually ended up with a net positive in the second quarter of this fiscal year. And we are projecting to continue that trend and exceed our budget goals for the total year. Next slide, please. So at this point, when we're looking at what's happening as of the first two quarters in the revenue fund, FY22 revenue so far is about $5.7 million over FY19. And again, we're continuing to track to exceed that budget. If you remember at the last discussion where we talked about our third quarter projections, the board authorized a slight increase to the revenue goals as well as to the expenditure goals, so we could meet the increasing capacity demands that we have for our programs. Again, golf and managed parks are the main drivers, and we're continuing to certainly look at expenditures, but we have made a commitment to all of our centers to make sure that they're able to get the supplies and be able to make sure that they don't have to hold back in terms of meeting our customer needs. So you can see that in general, our highest declines when we're comparing FY22 to FY19 are really in non-merit salaries. We'll see that go up, but we do continue to I believe it's going to be lower than budget as we look forward in the next 2 quarters here. So in general, we are in a positive situation. We will see the impact after this quarter on our compensation, but again, it's not going to be the significant impact that we will feel in FY23. Next slide, please. So here, Mr. Quincy, I will turn it back over to you and see if there are any questions.
Any questions? Comments? Okay, thank you, Mike. Ken Quincy, again, thank you, Mike, and I'll ask if there's a consensus to move this forward.
Yes.
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 Okay. There'll be no further matters to discuss. I will hereby adjourn the Budget Committee.
So are we going to recess for 10 minutes?
Yeah, we don't start until 6. All right, it is 6 o'clock and Dr. Carter has joined us. Dr. Carter, will you state your name and the location from which you are participating?
Yes, Cynthia Jacobs Carter, participating from my home in Lee District.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I will turn it over to the chair, Mr. Quincy.
Ken Quincy, I will call the Planning and Development Committee to order. It is 6 p.m. and I will ask Amy Vosper to introduce the items.
Good afternoon. This is Amy Vosper. And for the first item, I'd like to introduce Kelly Davis from our Planning and Development Division. Kelly.
Hey, my video is not on. Sorry. Hello, my name is Kelly Davis. Obviously, I'm project manager, Planning and Development Division, here to present the scope approval for the Laurel Hill Golf Course Irrigation Improvement Project. Laurel Hill Golf Course was opened in October 2005, and since then there has not been any irrigation upgrades to the course. The central control system is not functioning. Sprinkler head failures have become unmanageable and require staff to be pulled from other tasks to replace the heads in order to maintain the ability to irrigate the golf course. The irrigation control project includes replacing sprinkler heads and swing joints, expanding some of the irrigation zones, replacing the control system with a new 2-wire system, which will allow for more flexibility with the irrigation system control, and also adding some quick couplers to the system. Approval of this project scope would allow for the project to be started before the heat of the summer begins this year.
This is Amy Vosper. Thank you, Kelly.
Is that it?
That's it for
Okay.
this item.
Ken Quincy, are there any questions on this? Okay, I will ask if there's a consensus to move this item forward. It will be on the board agenda for this evening.
Yes.
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 Okay, and we'll turn it back to Amy Vosper to introduce the next item.
Thank you. This is Amy Vosper, and I'd like to introduce, there are 2 items that are going to come next. The impact of the change of the Park Authority bond cycle will be presented by Mike Peter, and the Mount Vernon Rec Center funding strategy will be presented by Sarah Baldwin. And if we could maybe hold our discussion or your discussion until both items are presented. Thank you.
Can I just clarify that a little bit? I'm sorry, I wanted to. The next item is going to be talking about Mount Vernon. They're separate items, but we really do think that we really can't discuss one without the other. And so for that reason, I mean, obviously if there's specific stuff that you need to ask for clarity, but I think that the 2 will really talk to each other. So I just wanted to put a finer point on that. Sorry.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that introduction and for that clarification there, Jay. As promised at our last meeting, we're coming back today to give you a little bit more background and talk a little bit more about what we see as the potential impacts of these changes that have been proposed in the county managers, the county executives CIP documents that have been put forward. Go to the second slide, please. And here, again, just to remind everyone what we're talking about here, the four major changes that have been approved, or excuse me, that have been proposed right now is first an increase in the annual countywide bond sale from $120 million to $170 million, split between the county, all of the county and schools. The proposal is to move to a 6-year referendum cycle rather than a 4-year cycle. Right now, our original focus was that we would expect that we could go up to $25 million per year, but with the baseline still looking to be a $100 million park bond every 6 years, it brings that possibility down from up to 25 million to more like 17 million. This proposal also includes moving the 2024 bond to 2026, and then the 2028 bond to 2032, so on and so forth. We also talked a little bit about how Nova Parks has now been moved out of bond financing with this proposal and into the general fund, and that's about $3.3 million or so annually. Now, keep in mind, right now, our current cash flow projections, which we'll talk about in just a moment, show us as spending everything we have, about $170 million that's been authorized by FY 2026. And we have some large projects, of course, in there. Patriot Park North, which is well on its way towards completion later this calendar year. That's $20 million. Mount Vernon Rec Center that we'll be talking about here in just a little bit, and we'll get a better sense of what that's looking like. Lee District Center improvements could end up costing as much as $14 million. The Audrey Moore Center that we'll also be talking about here shortly, as well as, of course, Sully Woodlands. So there are a lot of big ticket items in there. And just looking at our rec center needs, those can total more than $200 million. And if that's the case, it could take several bond cycles for us to be able to get through that with this current system. Next slide, please. This is just to remind everyone of the work that was done with the consultant company Brailsford back in 2017, which really helped to lay out the overall needs for the entire park system. Just as a refresher, back in 2017, we had the category critical, which was defined as repairing what we have, sustainable, which was defined as upgrade existing issues, and then visionary, which was defined as new and significant upgrades. And in 2017 dollars, that time frame that would go up to 10 years was valued at approximately $939 million. That's, of course, increased quite a bit now that we're at 2022. But this roadmap has really given a framework to our CIP program. But certainly, even before these changes in the proposed CIP would not have been possible within a 10-year time frame. Next slide, please. Now, we've seen this before as well. We update this each year in our conversations. And this just reminds us that we are over 70 years old as a park system. And with an older system comes more infrastructure needs at the end of the life cycle for our different assets here. And you can see as of this year, our asset needs are about $166 million. You spread these all throughout the system here, and you can see that we have rec centers at about $28 million, other building and structures at about $36 million. This just shows the needs that we have really right now to do our best to address. Just reminding everyone from our last needs assessment survey, residents said that if they were given the opportunity to spend $100, they said overwhelmingly that $70 should go to maintaining existing parks and facilities. So this number of $166 million, it increased from FY20 when it was about $159 million. And of course, some of this is CIP work, and some of it is work that can be done in-house if we have the staff available to do it. Certainly, it's cheaper to do that over the long haul, And our in-house staff also can do repairs and spot fixes to extend the life of structures without full-scale replacements. But nevertheless, even $166 million is a big number. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we talked about in the last meeting when we were discussing these program updates, we wanted to get a sense of what the impact would be for things that were last considered for the 2020 bond, and then they're continuing now to move out based on not being funded at that point. That totals already about $570 million in specific projects that have been identified and not yet funded. So that's a combination of that critical and sustainable category combination, while the visionary investment would focus on projects like these listed here that we've been talking about. Fairfax History Museum, a new field house, a destination playground in the western part of the county, new skate parks. All of these different pieces really meet that $500 million visionary investment goal. And again, at the current level of $100 million bonds now every 6 years, we would not be able to get through all of this list until about 2082, so 60 years. And also keep in mind that this is assuming no inflation and no other issues we would have to address. Next slide, please. This is also part of that Brailsford consultant focus. This showed that our capital maintenance and renovation needs would outstrip our revenue by 2037. This was a projection from 5 years ago and did not consider blips like the last 2-year COVID period. But you can see here that those lines are continuing along those roads to converge. We just talked about positive news where we are this year. But again, when you compare all of this, these two lines really start to be the same. And then those expenses, if we don't address them in a consistent and wide-ranging way, they start to get larger and larger. So again, when we just look at our critical needs, it would take over 30 years with a $100 million bond every 6 years. These trends will continue. Now, when we look at all of this as well, and we'll look at all of our rec center sustainability needs in just a second, just to keep up with our staff trying to focus on rec center spot fixes and some larger maintenance items there, we're projecting that we would need at least about $5 million per year from each bond. So that's $30 million over 6 years just to keep things operating. But when you take a look at the next slide, you start to get a sense of really what we're focused on. All of our different rec centers are very close to reaching, or they've already reached the end of their projected life. They're generally expected to last for about 30 years. Mount Vernon, as we all know, the aquatic center opened in '83, but the ice rink opened in '79. Audrey Moore opened in '77. We had several others that opened in '80, '82, all the way up until 2005 with the Cub Run Rec Center. So here, what we're projecting out is both some of these full replacements like Mount Vernon, which we'll be discussing in a moment, like the Audrey Moore Rec Center, but also simply those sustainability recommendations. And when you add in the possibility of a new rec center in Reston that really couldn't be focused on until now the 2050 bond, we're talking almost $300 million in 2022 needs here. So generally, when we focus on these, the cash flow for just one of these major projects are generally spread over 2 to 3 fiscal years. So a project like South Run listed here, which could potentially cost close to $15 million in each of the years it's under construction, it not only takes a big portion of that bond, but it also takes a big portion of the available cash flow. So just to keep this in mind, Audrey Moore could potentially take half of an entire bond. When we look at GW, Lee, and Providence, that could take more than 1/3 of an entire bond. Cub Run and South Run, half. Oakmar and Spring Hill, half. And a new Reston Center, half. Now, without going into all the compounding interest rates and all, if we simply projected a 7% annual increase, keep in mind that $1 today would equal in 2026 about $1.31, about $1.97 in 2032, 2038, $2.95, up to $4.43 in 2044, and $6.65 in 2050. So even though we're talking about close to $300 million in 2022 baseline funds, we're really talking about a lot more when we just focus on a possible compounded increase year over year and what those costs are.
Michael,
Next
the
slide,
other
please.
thing that's not included in here is you've got Cub Run on here, and I know we're not having this discussion, but you've got Cub Run on here. Cub Run is up in the air for us because we have no idea if we're going to have to find another site and build another center in that part of the county if the school system does not come through and renew the lease on the Cub Run facility. And that needs to be put into the equation somewhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. With Cub Run, it's not as simple as the fact that it was opened in 2005 and would reach close to the end of its useful life in 2035. There are all of these other issues as well. And that's a rec center serving a large district as well. Next slide, please. That was just to show you some of the impact of all of this on our rec center sustainability needs. But also there are other pieces, of course, that we always put together in the bond referendum. So talking about land acquisition, open space preservation, and access. Right now, available, we have about $3.4 million in land acquisition money. That is supposed to last us until just about FY 2028, which certainly does impact our availability of funds to be able to act on new opportunities out there. We all know about the benefits of land acquisition and what we're trying to do to be able to provide safety for species out there, to provide certainly a place where people can refresh and boost their own mental health. But all in all, $3.4 million at this point is not that much to get us through the time that we have. All of the escalating needs that we're talking about here with facilities alone start to push out these other priorities. We have playgrounds and other amenities and opportunity areas that very much need a focus. That's certainly the focus of PROSA. Our equity work will be delayed if we don't have the capital funds to be able to follow up on the recommendations that are made there. $3 million right now is our current bond programming for natural resource stewardship. And even this would be stretched thin, making it more difficult to keep up with our 4,000 plus acres of actively managed parkland. So there are a lot of other implications here, but we also wanted to turn this just a little bit and show you what this cash flow could very much look like as we're moving forward. So there are a few assumptions on the next slide. This slide assumes right now that we would move the Mount Vernon Rec Center to beginning construction at the beginning of the next calendar year, and that's what Sarah will be talking about here in just a moment. This also assumes that the Audrey Moore Center would be the next rec center to be addressed, and you see $50 million here. If we were to do it today, it would be probably closer to about $35 million, but again, it's escalating based on when we believe that the funds would be available. We've already talked about the bond cycle moving to a 6-year cycle, that our planning, of course, has been traditionally based on 4 years of cash rather than 6. And right now that $100 million will continue to be the bond amount. Now we are working internally with our partners in the Department of Management and Budget. And there is discussion going on. Can we look at options to address this $100 million threshold? Or can we look at other ways that we might be able to address some of those rec center needs? And certainly those will be some of the takeaways that we talk about here, but there is conversations going on at this point. So to look at this graphically, if we can go to the next slide, this was incredibly complicated when we put it together the first time. But what we attempted to do here is to narrow it down and show basically forecasting through what's in the proposed CIP right now with our cash flow, what we expect to see happen over the next several years. This also shows a new bond that would be voted on in November of 2026 and would start, the cash could start to come as early as January of 2027. But you can see the impact here of moving Mount Vernon to get it done now between FY23 and FY25. You see some spikes there. That spike there in FY22 is because of really just pent up issues with construction projects that are happening right now. We talked about those just a few minutes ago. Then you can see that because we start to run out of cash, we drop down in FY26. In this next bond cycle, that's when we would be looking at Audrey Moore over this time period of FY27 to 29. And then we would drop down again. You see, we drop down in FY30, and then 31 and 32 is potentially just enough for those overall rec center maintenance items that we were talking about just a little bit ago. And you can also see how it then goes back up, of course, when the next bond cycle hits us. But you can see going up and down here, this is our projected cash flow need. And that red through line there shows that, yes, this year, because we have built up some cash to address what we're doing right now in FY22, that's a little bit higher. But then we're always at that $25 million mark. And then based on a $100 million bond, we drop down to that $16,700,000 mark, which is nowhere near what our system needs to even just complete Audrey Moore and all of the other projects that would be assumed that we'd focus on here. So just to put it in perspective, FY22, as we said, it includes Patriot Park, Solely Woodlands, Hidden Oaks, certainly some land acquisition. We have rec center improvements and our usual flow for natural resources and other needs in FY23, 24, and 25. So this isn't just for Audrey Moore and just for Mount Vernon, but that shows you how addressing these facilities that are becoming increasingly more expensive stretch over and above what our needs would have been even without those facilities. Next slide, please. So just to reiterate, these are the key points. We've talked about the proposed changes to the bond cycle. We've talked about the fact that it's going from a 4-year to a 6-year. And we're seeing just in looking at our rec centers, the need for a bond cycle that could allow us to address deferred maintenance and invest in all of our facilities, not just the rec centers. As we've talked about here, and we were talking about in previous discussions, we are focused on providing an equitable park system. Prices keeping increasing, and also keeping in mind that our ability to manage these projects and move things quickly, it's really based on us having appropriate planning and development staff, and a lot of those salaries are bond funded to keep these projects going. Next slide, please. Further, the key points are that needing a bond cycle that is not dominated just by the recreation facilities that we've mentioned here. We have our focus on equity, deferred maintenance, investment, and also adequately addressing restoration of natural and cultural resources. So what it comes down to is a focus that the Park Authority needs increased cash flow, which would really mean that we would need an increased regular bond just to stay at least at the $25 million per year level. And also we need to talk about an off-cycle bond to address rec centers and be able to move those out of all of the other facility needs that we have. So I believe that sets the stage for our next discussions. I can turn it over to Amy to then send it on to Sarah.
So unless Jay, did you want to say anything at this point? Okay, let's go ahead and turn it over to Sarah.
Good evening, everybody. Sarah Baldwin, Deputy Director for the Park Authority. Next slide, please. So you all know that this past summer, we went out to bid for Mount Vernon Rec Center, and the bids came in well over budget. And we made the decision at that time to hold off on moving forward to see if the market stabilized. And tonight we're going to bring a recommendation to you to move forward with the project based on a variety of factors that we'll run through this evening. So some background, we originally budgeted 40.7 million for the rec center renovation project at Mount Vernon. That was funded through 2008, 12, 16, and 20 bonds. To date, we've spent 4.7 million and we have 36 million remaining. We're estimating at this point, based on the bids that have come in and the increases that we're seeing in the market, that the total project cost is going to be between 63 and 67 million, with a shortfall of 22.5 to 26.5 million. You all know the factors that are impacting increased construction costs. We're seeing it on the news every night. There's supply chain issues, there's uncertainty in the market. And the phasing that we originally proposed when we went out to bid was very complex and risky for the contractors. Next slide, please. So since we received the bids this summer, of course, we've gone back and reviewed the bid documents to determine if there are any cost savings. We've analyzed the phasing that was originally proposed as a part of the project. We analyzed whether or not we should keep the rink open while closing the rest of the facility, and whether or not that would save us money and allow us to continue to make revenue during the facility renovation. And then we analyzed whether or not closing the entire facility for a period of time made sense and would reduce costs. With every option that I'm going to go through in a couple of slides, we evaluated the revenue impacts of the change or the option, and we estimated what we thought the cost savings could be for the bond costs. We evaluated potential funding sources, which I'll go through a little bit later, and we consulted with other county agencies to see if they were seeing the same impacts as we are in terms of price increases. And of course, everyone is seeing between a 20 and 33% increase in construction costs. Next slide. While all of this was going on since the summer, we've experienced some significant critical maintenance issues at Mount Vernon. Over the summer, the chiller failed. If you go to Mount Vernon now, you'll see the chiller on a flatbed truck outside of the facility. Within the last couple of weeks, the dehumidification system failed within the ice rink. So right now we're renting the dehumidification system and the chillers at the tune of about $200,000 per year for each rental. Our pool packs, which operate our pools, are close or at their end of life, and their replacement would be about $2 million. The roof is failing at a cost of about $1.5 million. And then one of the most concerning system issues that we have right now is the electrical gears, which operate the building. The gear system was put in when the rec center was built in 1979. And over the years, we've done everything we can to hold that system together until we got to the point of renovation. But our concern at this point is that we can't find parts to repair the system when it goes down. When the system goes down, if we aren't able to find parts, it could result in a full closure of the facility until we're able to get power back. And then finally, if you go in the ice rink right now, many of the bleachers are in disrepair and closed because we're holding off until we decide what we're going to do with the renovation and don't want to invest money into something that would be taken out when we renovate the facility. Next slide. Here are some pictures of Mount Vernon. I know many of you have been on tours of the facility in the past, and this just demonstrates how old the infrastructure at Mount Vernon is. Next slide. So we considered several options for how do we move this project forward or whether or not we should stop the project. So option A is a full 2-year closure of the facility. Option B would be to eliminate the second ice rink. Option C is a phase closure to the facility, which would keep the ice rink open. Option D was a multi-phase closure, which is what we bid in the summer. And then option E was to stop the project. For option A, this would be a 24-month closure of the facility. It would allow us to keep the second rink. We estimate it would save us about 2.5 million in capital costs. During the closure, we estimate that we would lose about 1.3 million in revenue. And of course, some of the challenges with that would be, customer service during those 24-month closure. However, but we believe that we could move camps, classes, swim teams to other facilities to accommodate them during the closure. The second option was to eliminate the second rink. This would result in a possible 22-month closure. It would save us about $11 million in capital costs. We would lose about 1.5 million in lost revenue. And the reason that the revenue loss is higher here with a shorter closure is that during the time that we would be keeping the rink open, we would have to rent the chiller and dehumidification systems. Of course, some of the challenges with that would be the lost revenue. And we would have to go back and redesign the building. And Andy can speak more intelligently than I can from an engineering perspective, but we estimate to redo the drawings, which would be required, redesign the facility, re-permit the facility. It would take us another 1.5 years before we could start the project. And again, it would mean a complete redesign of the facility. Option C was a phase closure. The length of the project would be 36 months. It would save us about 1.5 million in capital expenses. Operational impact would be about a $2.1 million revenue loss. Again, the revenue loss is higher here because the impacts to the customers for a 36-month renovation and the fact that we're renting the dehumidification and chillers during that time. Option D was also reviewed. This would mean a 41-month construction schedule. It would allow us to keep the second rink. We believe that a multi-phase closure would result in increased costs for the project. And during the 41 months, we would anticipate a $3.5 million revenue loss. Again, that's a result of the impacts of our customers going to the facility for almost 4 years when it's under renovation, the impacts to customer service during that time, and the impacts of us having to rent the chiller and dehumidification during that time. And then the final option that was reviewed was for us to stop this project. Of course, that would not result in a planned closure. It would allow, we would not have a second rink. It would save us about 36 million because we've already spent 4 million. Operating costs, we anticipate at between 1 and 7 million in need in replacement of just the systems at Mount Vernon, which most likely would impact the bottom line in the revenue fund. Our concern with the total failure of the electrical system could result in an emergency shutdown sooner than later. And our concern with not having the operational funds to address all of the system needs within the facility if we decided to not move forward with the complete renovation. So those were the 5 options considered. Next slide, please. Staff recommendation is to go with option A, which is a full 24-month shutdown of the facility. The benefits of that, a better experience, as I mentioned, going through construction for almost 4 years, phasing the project would be, a significant impact on the user experience. Again, we are very concerned with the systems failing and us having to have an emergency shutdown. We would only have a 24-month construction schedule and then we would reopen. We do see a potential savings by not phasing the facility. We also would not have to deal with the unbudgeted expenses that we're dealing with now for the rentals of the chiller and the dehumidification system. Of course, so the cons are the impact to the customers and the impact to the revenue fund with about a 1.3 estimated net revenue loss. And of course, the impact to our staff that would be reassigned to other facilities during the closure. Next slide. So how would we propose to deal with the operational impacts of such a closure? As I mentioned, we would redeploy our merit staff to other sites. We would do the same with seasonal employees. I'm sure it's not news to you. We have significant challenges with filling positions, especially seasonal positions, lifeguard positions throughout the system. So we're confident that we can reassign staff if they're willing to go to other facilities to other facilities within our system. We would encourage pass holders and class participants to use other rec centers. As you know, GW and Lee District are very close to Mount Vernon. We would extend the hours at GW Rec Center to accommodate swim teams and swim lessons. We would move swim teams to other locations. And then we would work with local rinks to help them to work with them to accommodate the swim teams as much as possible. And then we would offer camps and classes at alternative locations, schools, other rec centers, and any facility that we can find within the system. Next slide, please. So the big question, of course, is how will we fund the increase? As I mentioned, we're estimating a shortfall of between 22.5 and 26 million. Staff's recommendation is that we reallocate project funding from Audrey Moore, the collections facility, and Laurel Hill Central Green. And we picked these three projects because all of them can move forward with design with the funding that we have available in 2020, but we will not be able to move forward with the construction of any of these projects until the 2026 bond. So rather than sitting on this money until 2026, we would reallocate it to Mount Vernon. And then finally, hopefully we wouldn't need to, but we would want to put aside additional funding from Lee District Rec Center of about $4 million to address any contingency that's needed in other costs that come up throughout the process. Next slide. So in terms of next steps, our recommendation, we're hoping would be approved by the board on March 23rd. We would implement an aggressive communication plan with customers. We would update drawings to reflect the full closure. We would bid the project in early fall and hopefully move to construction in early 2023. Next slide. And that's all I have for you. So if I may, Jay Cole, Executive Director, I just wanted to sort of bring it all together a little bit. The reason why we wanted to group the two things together is because the Mount Vernon situation really highlights a lot of the issues that we're having with having to pull money from different projects and how we're sort of stealing from Peter to pay Paul in order to get projects done. Our CIP, specifically the rec center issue, is extremely concerning to us. I just wanted to point out in one of Michael's slides about pushing Reston out to 2040. If we continue the way that we're going, we might, if we don't push a rec center off, we might maybe have one bond cycle without a major rec renovation after Reston is done. And then we're right back at Mount Vernon with a 30 to 50 year lifespan for our rec center. So we're dedicating 50% of our CIP to rec centers, which will completely be debilitating to any kind of an equity agenda that we have, much less taking care of a very aging park system with all of the deferred maintenance, the trends that are coming, being able to renovate existing parks. I've had conversations with people And one of the things that I've find is that people, when they think of our CIP, they think rec centers. And so we're in conversations with DMB, and we're trying to explain our CIP demands outside of rec centers to understand what it takes to be the largest landowner in the county, with infrastructure numbering in the thousands, trails, bridges, pipes, stormwater management facilities, roofs, bathrooms, all of those things that our constituents expect us to keep at a high level, and we need to for safety reasons. So I just wanted to sort of bring that together a little bit. We are in conversations with DMB, but we definitely wanted to talk about the CIP and then give a real life example that we're dealing with Mount Vernon all together to sort of start the conversation. So that's what I have. Then turn it back over to Mr. Quincy.
Thanks, Jay, and thank you, Amy, Sarah, and Mike. Let's start some discussion. Mr. Gorham.
So I had planned to say that I'm not shocked by this, because Bill and I had the opportunity to see at least the rec center presentation, part of this presentation 2 days ago, and I had become used to it, and was going to analyze it very unemotionally and stuff like that. But frankly, I find myself, almost as disturbed, maybe more disturbed, coupled with the other financial stuff we've looked at, at these prospects and the things we're going to have to do to accomplish them. I will say, of course, one of my first reactions when I saw it the first time was, well, there's 2 other projects in the Mount Vernon Magisterial District that are gone for the foreseeable future, $7 million worth, right off the bat. So the only thing that's happening in Mount Vernon now, if we decide to go forward with the staff recommendation, is the rec center, and I'm starting from scratch, for funding on the rest of the stuff. So there's kind of a overall kind of analysis of my feelings, the Mount Vernon perspective of it. I do think staff has thought it through really, really well, but wow, just as disturbing is the overall finances that we've just all looked at. And we can't let it stand. We can't go to that 6-year bond. I've lobbied my supervisor. I'll lobby him again. We all need to be doing that. Another point is, this budget that's out right now, this bond news and stuff like that, it's just there's no consideration at all for the equity that we've talked about so much over the last couple of years. But I really feel like big picture here, we've got to communicate these things that we looked at tonight, and we've all seen lots of these charts and graphs that were put up before, and we all understand them pretty well at this point, after seeing them many times and several times and knowing what they're trying to portray anyway. But I'm not sure that our situation is being communicated well enough to the community, to the board members, the people that hold a lot of our purse strings. So evolving around to this big thing, one thing that's really clear to me is we've got to put together a program of communication, that's more soundbitey, that you can present to a supervisor or the public in small blocks instead of the big ones that are so hard to understand. We've got to have like just a full frontal press on really what the picture is for the financing of the park system, to include things about neighboring facilities and what percentage of budgets are used for them or what raw dollars are used for them. We shouldn't be in this place being one of the richest counties in the country, just scrapping and scraping by. And we're not even scrapping and scraping by. This presentation tonight shows just a long downward spiral. We've got to get out of this position, and a lot of it's out of our control, but we need to convince the people that it is their control, that we need to have more funding for parks. It's really critical. And I'm sorry, I'm almost just rambling at this point, but those are some of my thoughts. And again, very, very depressing stuff, as Bill said last meeting.
Further comments? I will make a comment concerning what Linwood said about getting the word out. And we had an excellent example of that with Mike's presentation, Mike and Jay's quick presentation to the Federation of Friends. And I think it was a superb presentation and apparently well understood by those that attended that meeting. And I think it was very beneficial to have that type of outreach as evidenced by that meeting. Any other comments?
And
Go
Tim
ahead.
Hackman. Tim Hackman. One other thought is, although I don't know that it would make a great deal of difference incrementally in terms of our income that would be available for construction, we might want to consider, from an appearance standpoint, a voluntary or involuntary facilities surcharge on our fees that make use of facilities like the rec centers. I'm thinking maybe, just off the top of my head, a 5% surcharge that would be used to help funds that would then go toward our construction budget for those facilities. It probably wouldn't make a big difference, but the attention that such a move might get might help us make our point that we're not making ends meet here. Just a thought.
Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, so a bunch of thoughts come to mind. I know we took both of these and put these both together, and it helps bring it to a picture. So if you don't mind, I'd like to deal with the two issues, but I want to deal with the second one first, i.e. the renovation. And Linwood, I'm curious as to your feedback as much as anything else. Right now, we have in front of us an information item that's going to turn into an action item, as I understand it, that we should embrace the idea that we should do a renovation, a full renovation, both sheets of ice, that we should shut the rec center down for 2 years and deal with the funding by moving those pieces around. First and foremost, I appreciate staff and I appreciate everybody trying to figure out how to do this with the budget realities. Linwood, are you comfortable with, are we as a board comfortable with, are we good with shutting it down for 2 years? One note, and Sarah, I appreciate what you said about the ice and try and find other places of ice. Let's make something very clear. The reason we're putting in a second rink is because the ice is full. Ice all over the county is full. That's why these kids get up at 4 a.m. to go use the ice. That's why adults are playing games that start at 11:30 at night. So I think it's important that we not sugarcoat the impact, because it's not like if we shut down our ice, somebody else has unused ice that they've just been holding in reserve just in case. So
Mike,
this makes sense to me, but I don't know, Linwood, what you think.
Well, at that first presentation, Amy and Sarah and Bill will and Jay will tell you the first words out of my mouth were pretty much that, coupled with the fact that the ice makes the most money at the rec center and will in the future also. My argument was, is it really worth it not to phase it at this point? And the problem is that where that's what our original intention was, now we have this issue of these very high rents from these two failed major systems at that rink. And that kind of really skews the potential for keeping that revenue neutral. And Jay made the point, when I ask about that phasing that we're talking about right now, that we really have to do everything we can to give everybody everything. And this is a way that everybody will get everything at Mount Vernon although there's a 2-year delay on it, but it will also preserve the ability to give other people past this rec center everything that they expected on the bond. And I have to say, it was really hard for me to argue that point. That's a very valid point when it comes to fairness. It is definitely going to be a challenge. As you know, the sports organizations are very well organized, and I know that we will hear from them. But I did discuss this morning this issue with Supervisor Stork, and he thought that we should try to do it as efficiently as possible. And we've come up with some strategies to try to deal with the public opinion on that, the talking points and those kind of things. Hard to argue your point as far as need for ice, but in overall fairness and giving everybody everything going towards the future, I can't argue to phase it at this point.
Linwood, just so you know, I'm comfortable. I'm not saying we should phase it. I'm just saying we should be honest with people about the impact. So I was just curious. And then when we finish on the rec center, I really do want to talk about the first part of the presentation. Jay, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to answer your question as well before you move on to the next one. Jay Cole, Executive Director. And I don't want to harp on it. With a bond that's enough to get all of our projects done, we can spend $2 million to make sure that we don't disrupt service as much, right? That's what an aptly funded bond gets us, to make sure that we don't close the ice. Without that $2 million, and that's if we're praying that nothing else goes wrong in the year extra that it'll take us to do everything, that we don't have to sink more money into. That's $2 million that we're taking from another project. And that's kind of the situation that we're in with this bond, is we just keep on pushing the problem back and making decisions now so that a small amount of people are inconvenienced. I get it's a big inconvenience. We're not sugarcoating it. It's huge. Like this was why it took so long to come up with this. This was not our first, what staff believed was going to be our recommendation, but looking at the numbers and looking at how much stuff it pushes off, it's a hard choice. The one that we're not taking lightly, but this is really the only way that we can really justify doing it without, finding $2 million more from another project.
To answer your question really directly, Mike, I'm absolutely not comfortable with it, just as I sense that you're not comfortable with it either. But I can't, when I look at the bigger picture of the whole park authority and countywide, everybody else, it's really hard for me not to go along with this. I really think it's the fair and right thing to do.
Okay, so then to the first presentation, the one about spending and stuff, a couple things come to mind that I think honestly may have been overlooked and may make it even worse than what it is. First of all, one of the things that seems to be built into this is this idea that we know what we want a rec center to look like in 2040, or that we know what a renovation is, what we want a renovation to look like in what is 2036 or 2042 or whatever the right dates are. Mount Vernon is a great example, I think, of the reality that one-for-one replacements are not always the smart thing to do. For example, we're adding an entire sheet of ice, which makes the entire complex that much more expensive. It's the right decision to do. We talked about it. We talked to the community about it. We looked at it. It's the right thing to do. What that could mean is either A, we don't have that flexibility in the future to do what is the better thing for the community in terms of the rec centers, or B, we're actually going to absorb and use more of the bonds for rec center stuff than we are currently projecting, which I think, realistically, it's rare for me to see a project that we don't look at something and say that which was built 30 years ago needs to be changed in some significant way to meet the current community needs, because things change. So I think that we should assume that we may actually end up spending more on each rec center than we're necessarily doing. But the other thing is the chart that shows how we go cash flow negative, and I think it's 2035. I think that one of the things that we all need to consider and remember when talking to anybody out there is that that impact is not on the bond. That's impact on the day-to-day operational dollars of the park authority. So we're not talking just about what the impact is in terms of renovations and doing things to keep things functioning, maybe build one new rec center at some point in the next 60 or 40 years or whatever it was. But that realistically, some of these decisions have impacts that will cause us to have to take real operational dollars and take them away from other things that are going on and spend them on rec centers. And I should point out to anybody that comes back and looks at this recording and says, "Oh, Mike Thompson hates rec centers." I think we need the pool. You know, we have pools so that schools don't have to have pools, so that there aren't 26 pools at all these different schools, and so that swim teams are doing their thing, and it has a huge impact on the community. In order for it to all make sense, we built rec centers around them because a pool by itself was a sinkhole financially. And so we have built these facilities, and they are important to the community, and they add value. And we need to recognize that in order to treat them correctly, it has a negative impact in the bond system on 6 years, limited to $100 million. The impact is going to be significant on everything else we do. And while your presentation focused mostly on the bonds, I think that you should also consider things I'm not considering that may impact operational real world dollars day in and day out based on what we can't do. It may mean, for example, that you project by 2032 we need 10 more maintenance staff. I mean, whatever, I don't know. But this has ripple effects that go beyond just bond dollars, but to the real operations of what we do and what we provide to the public.
Mr. Kendall?
We need to read Kyle in. Bill?
Yeah.
We need to read Kyle in, especially if he's going to speak.
Yeah. Mr. Stone, who are you and where are you?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kyle Stone, Braddock District Park Authority representative, calling in from Fairfax campus of George Mason University.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kyle. Let me get to Ron Kendall, who's had his hand up for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's being said about the rec centers. My only concern, I think, from the standpoint of making this decision now is, are we developing a pattern with Mount Vernon that allows us to apply that tool to the other times we're going to have the same experience when we move on to the next rec center? Now, I'm understanding that Mount Vernon is in real critical shape. And probably of all the rec centers we have, it is the worst condition. Is that possible? Or are there others that need more work? Kyle's nodding his head, so I'll let Kyle.
Ron,
The point I'm getting at is we need to have a mechanism for addressing this that's going to work over time. And if this is how we're going to work, is this the mechanism? Is option A, closing, flexibility, moving staff? If that's the best option for all the other times this issue will come up, we should have a discussion about that before we set the pattern of what we're going to do in the future.
Ron, this is Bill Bowie. Yeah, I understand. I hear what you're saying, but number one, have you ever been to Audrey Moore?
Yeah.
If you go to Audrey Moore, you'll get a real take on, how run down some of these facilities are. In terms of trying to put together a process, we've got a moving target. We're trying to catch Jello with a fork, at this point, and we're trying to get something accomplished that we've promised to the public. We've been talking about this for years. We've engaged the public for years. And at some point, we need to put a stake in the ground on this one, because it's going to take some time until we know what the rules are. It's going to take us some time to define a process on capital projects, period. And it may require we go back and look at the entire thing and reprioritize what the entire work plan looks like if we're going to incorporate things like equity into the discussion, as well as the changing community of interest in various locations around the county. It's going to look different.
Mr. Stone, you had your hand up.
I do. Thank you, Ken. Kyle Stonebrack, District Park Authority rep. Yeah, I mean, right now, Audrey Moore is being held together with baling twine and duct tape, and what little profit money Braddock District does spin off, I hemorrhage to just basic maintenance of Audrey Moore. But that specific comment aside, more generally, the current bond situation, what we anticipate the bond situation to be, certainly makes our rec center issue more acute. But whether we have a 4-year or a 6-year bond, I feel, this is my opinion, that we're held hostage as a system by our rec centers. And I think we need to be thinking about that. How maybe we don't have, I don't know what we have right now, 8, 9, maybe we don't have 8 or 9 rec centers moving forward. Or if Mike says it's an important community asset, maybe the schools need to chip in for the pools or something. But there's a lot more to a park system than 8 or 9 rec centers. And I am not comfortable, as long as I'm still on this board, with a bond system or just an outlook monetarily that prioritizes them so much above everything else we do. And that's not intentional, I don't think, by any one person on this board, but it's the direction we're headed because of the monetary situation we're in.
Okay, we are out of time. Thank you all. This is Ken Quincy.
Ken, find out if anybody else has. We can extend a little bit.
Okay, it's your call.
This is a very, very critical
I agree.
discussion. If we need to extend, let's do it.
Okay, it's your call. Any other comments?
Yes.
Yes.
Just as a point of order, we have a committee meeting scheduled for the 23rd of March to bring this back as well.
Yeah, that's the Mount Vernon issue we will bring back. And of course, the bond issue is ongoing. Cynthia, did you? Okay.
So this is just a kind of down the road, general kind of question. Has the time come maybe for us to consider hiring more fundraisers so that the foundation, Bobby and all, so that they could even run a campaign, bring more corporations and foundations into this so that we can really make a dent in our budget in a good way. So just something to think about.
Good point. Other comments?
Jim had a comment. Jim was trying to say something.
Yes, thank you. Jim Zook, at-large representative. Going to, I think it was Ron's point, I'm viewing this as a decision we're making based upon the information today, based on the situation with this facility. And I don't think it sets a precedent for how we address any other facility. We'll address that, and it doesn't set, a path for us or a requirement that we do the same kind of approach on the next facility. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Ken,
yes,
I know the plan was that we have another committee meeting about this on March 23rd and try to develop a consensus. I assume that the intent is that at the March 23rd board meeting, we would be voting to move this forward or not?
Well, we were going to vote on moving it forward. I don't know if it's going to be at that board meeting or not.
Jay Cole, Executive Director. So the plan was to have another committee meeting just on the Mount Vernon item, and then just to bring it up to the board to vote on it. Now, if we would like, if you all would like to continue, the conversation, we can look at the schedule and perhaps do a twofer, continue the rec center conversation while also continuing the Mount Vernon prior to it being called up. I don't want to short shrift the conversation.
Okay, but we weren't looking to move the Mount Vernon to the board meeting on the 23rd.
I think we were. That's why I was
Yes,
asking.
on the
Yes, we
23rd,
were.
that was the original
We
intent. Correct.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
the issue with moving it out further is there's been a proposal to cancel the first meeting in April. So we would not be looking until the end of April, and I think that's too far.
Yeah.
We will also have been engaging the Board of Supervisors and live presentations to the Board of Supervisors prior to that. So I think, we need to have the robust discussion, and whatever time it takes on the meeting on the 23rd, we need to push that forward.
Are these live presentations on the bond proposal?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Hearing none.
Point of order, Mr. Quincy, I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly. Do we want, because there's two items, one of them was not a consent item, which was about the CIP, which is part of this conversation that we're having. The other one is about Mount Vernon. Would you like us to put on to the committee meeting for next item, both conversations, so that we can have this global conversation, but then with the intent of pulling up Mount Vernon for a vote that evening?
I'll defer to Mr. Bowie on that.
Yes, that's what we would.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, if there are no other questions, this is Ken Quincy. If there's no other questions, I will hereby adjourn the Planning and Development Committee meeting.
Thank you, Ken. I'd like to call to order the Park Authority board meeting. And everyone is here except Maggie Godbold. She was absent and excused this evening. We start all of our board meetings with a public comment session, a period. So Judy, do we have anyone this evening?
Yes, good evening. Judy Peterson, Public Information Officer. We do have one speaker, and that is Jan David Brown. Sir, you would have 3 minutes to address the board.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, I know it says Jean, but that's my wife. But I'm Jan Brown. That's even more confusing. But I heard the last few minutes of what you were talking about with the rec centers. I know what I have is minuscule, but I do have a daughter. Now she's 4. She started in the pre-school program there last year. And it's a wonderful program. I'm sorry we don't have more of the rec centers. I think we have either 3 or 4 now. My gripe is I really do kind of look after that place. I've been a McLean resident for 45 years, and I love the rec center, participate and everything else. Today I go by, they're redoing one of the classrooms. They're putting in a black floor. It's the same kind of black floor that they use for weightlifting, and I think Amazon uses it in their fulfillment centers. But it looks like the highway. And the children are playing on this floor. They're 3 to 5 years old. They play on the floor. I know it's a black rubber. There's nothing wrong with the type of a flooring because it's soft. It's much better than the tile that used to be in there. But I do know, I'm in construction, they have plenty of other different colors that are a little more bright and receptive. And again, 4 hours a day in that type of facility, it just doesn't come across very well. I do feel that we just need to look at color schemes. Preschool today is a huge business. And I know there are better I guess accommodations and a little bit more modern updating. And rather than somebody just saying, oh, well, the rest of the floors are all black, let's just go with that too. Anyhow, I believe me, I like I say, I love the rec center. I like what y'all have done. I didn't realize we were, quote, having some problems. I know that the one at Spring Hill is perhaps the most used of all the rec centers. And I love the people over there that run the desk. And I also love our program that we have. Like I say, I wish we had more. Anyhow, I know that the floor could easily be taken up. It was only half put down today because it's not glued down or anything. It's the kind that interlock. This any other color, and it's a great flooring. But anyhow, I just think little things sometimes make huge differences, especially when we're trying to sell our preschool compared to all the other ones we have around here. Any questions?
The board doesn't generally ask questions at
Oh,
this point,
okay.
but they have heard you, and thank you. For your
I
comment.
did talk with Brian Mays today, and I appreciate you getting back to me. And I did talk with Tim Hackman. I don't know if Tim is there tonight, but anyhow, he led me down this road after talking to John Faust's office. So anyhow,
I am, Gene, as Tim Hackman, I am. And so thank you for your comments tonight. We
Okay.
will certainly take them under advisement, and staff has been informed.
I really appreciate it, and I truly feel very strongly about this. But anyhow, thank you for listening, and I wish you luck with the other situations. But I really do think we could get a huge number. We have them here in the county now, large corporations that would be more than happy to help out with some of these, rec centers throughout the county. Take care, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
sir.
you, Mr. Brown. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Judy, is that our only speaker?
That is, thank you.
Okay. We'll go on to admin items countywide, the adoption of the minutes of the February 23rd, 2022 Park Authority Board meeting. Is there a second? Is there a
Tim
second?
Hackman, I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. Action items in the Braddock District, A1 is Americana Park Maston Brook Volunteer Matching Fund Grant Program request for the Annandale North Springfield Little League.
I would move approval.
That's Kyle Stone.
Oh, right. Kyle
Yeah,
Stone,
Tim
Braddock
Hackman, I
District Park
second.
Representative.
Tim Hackman seconds. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. In the Springfield District, A2 is the Greenbrier Park, the Maston Brook Volunteer Matching Fund Grant Program request for Fairfax Athletics.
This is Mike Thompson. I move that we approve the Massachusetts Volunteer Matching Fund Grant Program request from Fairfax Athletics in the amount of $20,000 to install fencing at Greenbrier Park Field 5.
This is Tim Hackman, I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. Countywide, action item number 3, approval of the fee adjustments to the published fee schedule for 2022.
This is Tim Hackman. I move to approve the fee adjustments to the published fee schedule for 2022.
Ken Quincy, I second the motion.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. In the Mount Vernon District, A4, scope approval, Laurel Hill Golf Course irrigation system improvements that was presented this evening.
This is Linwood Gorm. I'd like to move the Laurel Hill golf course irrigation system improvements.
Ken Quincy, I second the motion.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. Information items countywide. Information item number 1 is the FY 2023 proposed budget and update on the capital improvement program, which we have discussed in detail. Chairman's matters. The only matter that the chairman really has is the fact that, we've got a really, really tough situation on our hands, and we need to pull out all the stops, whatever we need to do and whoever we need to talk to bring this to everyone's attention. Staff, myself, Ken Quincy, and a bunch of others had an opportunity to present to the Federation of Friends groups. They heard us loud and clear. They were very concerned. They mobilized and organized that evening to start to get the word out to the other friends groups, as well as to communicating to their various board of supervisors. I can't tell you how critically important this is. This has been a really, really stressful situation for all of you, because I've heard from each and every one of you about what a dire situation it was presenting. And I think the only way that the Board of Supervisors is going to understand this is with the presentation that we had tonight, along with actually showing them these are the things that you are not going to realize at all, or if certainly not in the foreseeable future in terms of projects. And I think that's the only thing. And we're going to have to engage the public in this in a very, very broad manner. And I don't want to be a total alarmist about this, but this is something that needs publicity in how it affects what we always tout as the best park system in the country. And we already see, where we're not up to snuff in terms of the dollars that we get to support this. So if we are going to continue to be the gold medal operation that we are, we've got to be properly funded. And we've got to also drive home the fact that none of these discussions at this point include those things that we signed up to when we signed those pledges for One Fairfax and equity. This doesn't include any of that discussion, and that's critically important. And as we've discussed before many, many times, equity is great. I love equity. I love diversity. Equity costs money. It costs dedicated resources. It causes you to look at things, define things and processes in a totally different way than we do them today. And so that's going to require some education and lots of lobbying. On a positive note, I was able to get Verizon to pick up the total cost of the summer concert series in the Hunter Mill District. And they gave us a full sponsorship of $15,000. And not only that, they have asked to participate in our volunteer program, because in the area, they've got 2.5 million hours of volunteer time that they need to expend on various community projects. And I told them we're more than willing to take a number of those hours off their hands with free labor. And they also want to participate more in the foundation. So I've had some conversations with Bobby. We're going to set up some meetings next week and see what more we can get out of it. But kudos to Verizon for stepping up. A good friend of mine is their VP of their lobbying part, and they stepped up and did the right thing. So thank you for that. And with that, I'll pass it on to Jay.
Thank you, Bill. Jay Cole, Executive Director, Park Authority. I want to start off by echoing what Bill said. It's such a hard conversation to have, and I want to highlight the fact that recreation is important. That's why this is a hard conversation, because recreation is also important, as our parks. And when Bill was talking about us being the best park system in the country, we are only close to that because of the people on this call. The staff, it's 100% the staff, because it's certainly not an embarrassment of riches in terms of resources. I think I joke around sometimes and say that our staff reminds me of a grandmother feeding 12 grandkids with a piece of bacon and a potato, and every kid gets fed. The fact that our park system looks the way it does from the dedication of our staff. So I just wanted to say thank you to them in general. And then on a couple of other important notes, Bill mentioned earlier, I wanted to note a change to the board calendar for April of canceling the April 13th board meeting. From the foundation, I just want to highlight that trust and accountability are key factors in any fundraising organization, including our Park Foundation, and they continue to earn the highest platinum level of transparency for program and financial reporting from Candid GuideStar. Charity Navigators Encompass rating system deems any score 75 or higher as a give a confidence recommendation. Currently, the Park Foundation received a perfect 100 over 100 based on finance and accountability report in the culture and community assessment. I'm very pleased and I'm really excited about this to announce everybody that Laurel Hill Golf Club was selected to host the 2022 United States Disabled Open Golf Championship, which will be held June 7th through June 9th. It's in its 5th year, and the national championship is the first of its kind to obtain world rankings for golfers with disabilities by the U.S. Golf Association. The 54-hole golf championship is open to golfers with physical and intellectual impairments with qualifications that are similar to the Paralympics and Special Olympics. So past tournaments were held in Richmond, Orlando, and most recently Longbow Golf in Mesa, Arizona in 2021. It's really an honor to be asked to host this tournament. Again, it's a tribute to the staff there, our beautiful course, the maintenance of that course. So I congratulate golf staff under Jesse for getting us that tournament. Park Foundation and Visit Fairfax are already on board and working closely with Jesse and Golf Enterprise and his golf team. We will give you further details to follow. Please let me or any staff or Jesse know if you're interested in volunteering or being involved in that. On a slightly, well, not personal, because note, I just wanted to update them about it. 230, I think, 2 parks on my park tour. So I've gotten the west side. Believe it or not, I'm working my way east in Kyle's area and a little bit in Mike's area. So just a little bit of a heads up on that. And I will finish up.
Thank you, Jay. One thing I did forget, it's been a long day. I had lunch today with the Chief Operating Officer of the Vietnamese Golf Association of America. They are a huge group. They have their own golf tour. And Flower Nguyen is just a tremendous person. I've known her for some time. And they would like to have a discussion about having their VGA of America National Open this October at Laurel Hill. Wow. And it would be a fantastic opportunity for us to actually introduce equity into golf. And so I've got all the particulars. I will get with you and Jesse and the other staff that we need to figure out if it and how it's possible to hold this event in the fall of this year. And they are also a very, very active group in terms of wanting to participate and volunteer for various efforts that the Park Authority is holding. So that was another exciting part of the day that made me smile and made me be able to come to this meeting at least with some positivity on that. So last thing for me is we did send out all of the committee assignments. If nobody has a problem with that, we will ratify that as a group this evening and move on from there. I don't know if we need a motion for ratification, but I would entertain one.
Yeah, I would so move to ratify the committee listing as set forth.
This is Tim Hackman. I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That motion carries. On to board matters. Dr. Adu.
Thank you, Chairman. I pass.
Dr. Carter.
Thank you, Chairman. Likewise, I pass.
Linwood.
I had an idea just a second ago. We'll run it by you guys and see if it's feasible or whatever. I was talking about the supervisors, understanding the financial situation. I think the presentation that Mike put together tonight was very good. It's one of the best that I remember seeing in a long time. I would like to schedule a meeting with my supervisor and bring Jay and Mike to his office and give that exact presentation to him. And I think it would answer a lot of questions. I think it would be important that Mike be there, that we have our absolute guru on all numbers, can answer any questions. And anyway, just an idea to help our cause.
I would be, J. Cole, we will be available anytime that you would like, you ask me to, and Mike to go. He doesn't have to answer.
I hope others think that's a good idea, and we'll do that also. We really need to get our financial message out.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Linwood. Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do need to mention that this Saturday at 1 p.m. at the Great Falls Grange, there's going to be a signing ceremony of a lease agreement between the Park Authority and the Great Falls Grange Foundation. Under the terms of this agreement, the foundation's day-to-day management will be run by the Great Falls Grange Foundation, management of the Grange and the schoolhouse, that is. The objective of this project has been about a decade in the making. So it is from the Great Falls community standpoint, it is understandably, they're very, very excited about this prospect and about the Grange being potentially used more frequently for community groups and events and weddings and plays, et cetera. So coming to this point has though been a lot harder than one might imagine. So I really appreciate all the hard work of staff, and particularly Amy Vosper, who's led this effort from the Park Authority's side. Very much appreciate all her work on that. So thank you very much. And that is it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Tim. Ron?
I'll pass tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Faisal?
A passer.
Mr. Quincy?
I would just like to second Linwood's idea. It's the same idea I had, and maybe some others had too, that have a presentation just as was given tonight, as well as the one that was given to the Federation of Friends. It's a very understandable presentation, very clearly put out, and will elicit comments. And I don't know whether you want to do this supervisor by supervisor. You said there's going to be some board presentations. I don't know if you included Mike's presentation as part of a presentation with the board of supervisors or not, but I think it's an idea that could be considered.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to, somebody mentioned we don't want to be an alarmist in this situation, and we don't, but we don't want to downplay the importance of it.
No.
It's very important, as mentioned in your comments, Bill.
Thank you, sir. Kyle?
Yeah, I'm gonna break character. I have something quick. Wanted to thank John Burke last week for babysitting me at a controlled burn at LNRC Lawrence Park. I've been trying to get to one of those since I got on the board and finally was able to make it happen. Really professional burn team led by Owen Williams. I want to give him a shout out too. Very interesting to see, learned a whole lot, important part of our natural resource work that we need to get people across the street to better support and fund. So that's all.
Thanks, Kyle. Mike?
I just want to relate to staff that I was at the Northern Virginia Youth Football Hall of Fame dinner on Sunday night. When I say dinner, and it starts at 3:30 in the afternoon and goes for like 5.5 hours. But there were lots of positive things said about Park Authority, about staff, about making it possible for all the kids to get out there and play. As I was talking to folks and just chatting with them, I'll also say that I brought up some of our bond issues and the financial impact with some of the commissioners from some of the different football operations and youth football operations in the county, and they clearly understand the need to be supportive. But more importantly, I just wanted to relay to staff that there's a lot of folks out there that recognize the great work you do, making it possible to put kids out on the field. So thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll pass.
All right. So we will now go into closed session, but I think we've got to clear the room first.
Yes, Jay Cole, what am I? Executive Director of Park Authority. I just thank you, staff who are not cleared to be in closed session. Thank you very much for your time and have a good night.
Just a reminder that until I finish the motion, we're technically open in case anybody from the public or whatever is on. Let's see. I move the Park Authority Board recess and convene in closed session. This is Mike Thompson. I move the Park Authority Board recess and convene in closed session for the discussion and consideration of matters enumerated in Virginia Code 2.2-3711 and listed in the agenda for the meeting as follows. Consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation, where such consultation open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the both body pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A7.
This is Tim Hackman. I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. We will now go into closed session for approximately 20 minutes. Yes, sir, I am ready.
I move the Park Authority Board return to open session.
Is there a second?
Tim Hackman, second.
All those in favor say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed say nay. That motion carries. C1 in Mount Vernon.
Wait. Mr. Chairman, I'm sure you're calling for the certification of topics.
Yes, sir.
This is Mike Thompson. I move the Park Authority Board certified to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under Virginia Code 2.2-3711, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the board.
Tim Hackman, I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. Closed session item number 1 in the Mount Vernon district is to approve the lease agreement with Eisman Golf Academy at the Laurel Hill Golf Course.
This is Linwood Gorham. I move that we approve the lease agreement for Eisman Golf Academy.
This is Tim Hackman. I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for your diligence and your patience this evening. I know it was a long evening. We got some tough things to handle over the next few weeks, but we are all here. If you need anything, if you need reinforcements or information of any type, please feel free to reach out. And with that, thank you again, staff. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good night, everybody.